Hello, everyone, and welcome to a brand new episode of the Jams and Tea podcast, where we spin the jams and spill the tea. And we are coming at you with an episode of reviews today, where we're going to be talking about two new releases. We're going to be talking about the latest album from emo outfit Home Is Where, their new album, The Wailer. And we're also going to be talking about the newest album from post-rock giants, Swans. We're going to be talking about The Beggar and The Wailer.
Absolutely. And I've been very much looking forward to talking about the Home Is Where album in particular. Which is the one we're going to kick off with, because Home Is Where, a increasingly high profile artist within the current wave of emo that's happening at the moment. One of the bigger names, one of the names that have crossed over with a little bit more success. An artist who's been incredibly important.
More recent as well. Like, I remember getting into them in early 2022, and I didn't hear many people talking about it. I feel like The Wailer has, and the press surrounding it has increased it a lot.
So they came to the fore, Florida-based emo band. They came to the fore in 2021 with the Don't Call It an EP album, I Became Birds, which is a shorter release, but certainly one which packs a hell of a punch. This is one of my favorite records of the decade so far. This is a record that initially I liked quite a great deal, but coming back to it more recently, it hit me like a fucking sledgehammer how powerful this record is and was and continues to be. Particularly the unique brand of emo that it offers that takes very heavily from acts from the more recent waves of emo like the Hotelier, but also combines that with a particular aesthetic and things like, the prominent featuring of harmonica on that record, and the
harmonica and horns and elements like that it almost sounds like if you made an emo record in the style of like Neutral Milk Hotel or Jordan Mason, like that kind of lush lo-fi.
That's how you can, I think, sum it up really, really well. It's a fusion of the Hotelier and Neutral Milk Hotel with that Jordan Mason stuff kind of hovering over as an obvious reference point as well.
It's because it's trans and sad and gay and also filled with lush orchestration.
Yes, absolutely. And so with I Became Birds, which very much has the energy of a well-produced bedroom emo record, and it's music we've been talking about a lot recently. We're going to continue to be talking about on the show when we do our video on The World is a Beautiful Place and I'm No Longer Afraid to Die very soon. But yeah, so it's stuff that's been on our mind a lot lately. And I know that, Jake, for you, this was a band that clicked into place fairly quickly recently on the arrival of this new record as well. So yeah, it's a big moment for this band, because while I Became Birds was fairly successful and turned a lot of heads, it felt like it was treated more as a promise of things to come rather than the out and out masterpiece that I think it is. And it certainly feels as though with The Wailer, simply purely on the basis of, for one, it's a longer project and a more sort of fulsome and ambitious project, but also one that's a little bit more patient in its execution and a little bit more varied than you might expect as well. There are elements of Home Is Where's sound that are introduced on I Became Birds that are fleshed out a little bit more here. Particular thing that sticks out to me is the recurring use of the singing saw on this album, which is just an incredible textural flourish that really sets this band apart. There's still that harmonica here as well, but maybe not quite as much of it as on I Became Birds. But yeah, this is a slightly more languorous and exploratory and maybe less visceral project than I Became Birds, a little bit more ephemeral, a bit more focused in this pool of emotions that it explores, and also structured in a really interesting way that I'll get into in a bit as well.
I feel like if you're really into emo, it's an easier entry point than I Became Birds is, because it leans much more into the Hotelier side than I think I Became Birds did. It is more reminiscent of other emo acts, and I do not mean that as an insult. I mean that more as like it is
not an insult on this podcast.
It has less of the flourishing high points in terms of those horns and harmonicas and things like that.
Of folk music and folk punk in this band as well that I think comes through in moments.
Some country too.
In moments of that first debut record. There's really only one song on I Became Birds that really leans into that heavier, more violent sound, which is Assisted Harakiri. And I feel like you get a little bit more of that.
That's my favorite song on there.
Her best song.
You get a little bit more of that on this record, but it's balanced by these very contemplative but emotionally hard-hitting swathes of the record. It has this real flow to it. I mean, it's notable that it starts, if you play the record on a loop, it ends at the exact moment that it starts. And actually, Brandon McDonald has said that the record is structured in an unusual way because the intended first song of the album is actually Every Day Feels Like 9/11, and the album's intended closer is actually Wailing for Sport. And the record is kind of flows, starts there and ends at Wailing for Sport. But for whatever reason, they've chosen to actually structure the record so that the beginning is halfway through it. So there's a lot of interesting and unusual approaches to structure here that make it stand out. And certainly, while I Became Birds felt like a really powerful collection of songs, this is undisputedly a singular flowing experience that is embellished and empowered by being immersed in it.
I have to disagree a little bit there because I think I Became Birds feels like a cohesive project as well. Like, I was going to make the comment that it is technically less than 20 minutes long, and people argue, is that really an album? It feels like a grand statement. It doesn't feel like it's.
I didn't
It
say
doesn't feel like you could add. Yeah,
it's got a cohesion to it. I mean, I think that's a perfect record. It's just that there's
it
not
doesn't.
a sense of continual languor.
Okay,
flow that this
I
one
misunderstood.
has. But yeah, I want to. We've gone back and forth a little bit here, Emily. I want to jump to you, Jake, as someone who's a little bit newer, to get your voice in before we go crazy here. What were your initial reactions getting into this band, and what do you think about this new record?
Well, I believe I first encountered I Became Birds because that made it onto our list of underrated records in 2021. And I checked it out just because of our mutual generic orange soda. Shout out.
Yeah, shout out soda.
Put that on my radar. And I revisited that, and kind of like Riley, I initially thought that that was a good project that, like, once I revisited, I was like, man, this is just nothing but absolute heat. I still think Assisted Harakiri is maybe one of the best songs of the decade so far. And so naturally, I have a lot of expectations when it comes to The Wailer as, being a longer, more, I guess, because I agree that the first album does feel like fleshed out for its shorter length, but you kind of want a more robust experience when you see it's basically twice as long. And honestly, I kind of think that I got everything I could have possibly asked for when it comes out of a debut. The opener, Skin Meadow, is my favorite song on here. I love how Animal Collective this song is. It sounds like a Strawberry Jam era Animal Collective filtered through acoustic instruments instead of electronic ones. Like that, the Skin Meadow, Skin Meadow, Skin, like that's like an AV Terror refrain, like through and through. I love that shit. It keeps coming back to like lyrical themes too that explore. I mean, obviously this is a very queer record, but a lot of it has to do, at least from what I can observe, you mentioning that part about the track list being different from an intended is interesting, just because I do really like the arc that I feel like this album does have, where it sort of feels like it's about the lack of willingness that one person has to participate in society at large, a society that doesn't really accept them, and that usually makes everyone, like, just the idea of participating in capitalism through the metaphor of whaling, I think is a really interesting and very like cathartic metaphor that this explores very, very vividly, even though it's only 34 minutes long. And you have moments on here that go from the, emo post-hardcore blistering bliss of Skin Meadow straight into the Wilco-esque alt country of Lily Pad Pupils, which is fantastic until it just explodes at the end. There are songs on here like Yes, Yes, 1,000 Times Yes, and Every Day Feels Like 9/11, where they really, really fucking go for the throat. Every Day Feels Like 9/11 has one of my favorite ideas that this band explore and kind of oscillate between, where they do the really like fried screamed vocals and then follow it up with like a melodious kind of refrain where they just kind of like scream really hard, then follow it up with the your own stomach, and they ride out these really kind of like warbled melody lines that are like really, really skillful and really, really well employed. And It's great for different reasons that I Became Birds is great. It reminded me, it's probably just because I have this band on the brain a lot, but like the fragmented approach to some of the song structures here and just the flow of it, it really did remind me of Whenever If Ever. Just that band's approach to sounding a lot bigger and just kind of like the throttling momentum, and a lot of the lyrical ideas I found to be quite similar. They're both bands that kind of write about being broke and being working class and how much it fucking sucks. And it makes for an identifiable listen. This was an easy album to come back to throughout basically every day this week, and I had a fantastic time with it.
There's a few like core themes of the record that I want to kind of introduce, and we can refer back to as I guess we continue discussing it. Like if I were to sum this album up in one word, I would say it's about enduring. Like it's not about necessarily surviving.
Yeah.
It's not about thriving. It's not really about anything other than the feeling of enduring constantly. Like every experience, every day, everything that you go through, and every way in which you move forward in your life or just move at all is an act of endurance, right? It is testing, it is pulling. And the idea of the album title as well, The Wailer, which works on multiple levels as well, because on the one hand, it's this sort of image of how you function and succeed in a capitalist society, how you know, on a meta level, it's about being in a band and to a certain sense, having to essentially hunt, having to essentially act in a very sort of, you know, vicious and kind of like, you know, controlling and sort of, you know, violent way in order to kind of have some level of success. In that sense, you have to kind of work through the industry. You have to kind of work through the machinations of how music releasing works and how touring works and all that kind of thing. You have to be a little bit vicious. You have to let go of some of your ideals to a certain extent, and you have to kind of capitulate if you want to have any level of success. And it creates a certain amount of dissonance that can be hard to resolve if you have particularly idealistic views or ways in which you want to live your life. And so the idea of the wailer, of the person who essentially is, you know, hunting the great beast, whatever that represents in this particular story, with the pun of wailing, you know, the wailer, the emo singer is the wailer, the person who just completely cowls and caterwauls and screams and atonally, you know, expresses themselves in whatever form comes naturally. So there's a way in which that title works on multiple levels, and there's that feeling of jadedness with engaging in a harmful system that I feel like the record explores the feeling of really, really well. And that brings it back to this idea of endurance and how being a part of a system that, you know, basically forces you to capitulate on some of your more radical beliefs to a certain extent in order to have a level of success, creates the sense of jadedness that leads to everything feeling like an exercise in endurance and something that doesn't really feel rewarding, even as you achieve success, because you're so distanced from any sense of victory by the, you know, the callousness, the coldness, the nature of hunting for success and of trying to, you know, you could also read it through the lens of the artistic process as well, you know, coming up with ideas and conceptualizing and making an album and living up to the hype can be like whaling, right? Your work of art that you are working on can be your white whale that you are desperately trying to strike through and that you are desperately trying to actualize, but you are suffering through every part of that process as well. I think that's broadly what the record's about, and I'm curious to hear what stands out about it to you guys, and what you think of that idea as it's explored on the album.
I mean, I think you can feel that referenced on a song like Daytona 500, where, you know, the lyric of the first person to lose comes in second. The idea, and especially using the idea of Dale Earnhardt as a symbol, someone who was so successful but never got to retire because he died on the track, and that sort of symbolism of it. And of course, the fact that, mentioning Daytona, they are a Florida-based band. There is an element here of like the malaise of sort of living in an area like there's a lot of poverty in Florida, and like the idea of them being outcast and everything like that, and still having to exist in that system surrounding them.
in terms of America as well, I mean, Florida is one of the places where you're seeing the most like brutal human rights violations happening right
Absolutely.
now through a legal context as well. And I don't think I don't know that I read. I mean, there's definitely text in this record in terms of trans suffering, but a lot of it is
I
a
Became
lot of
Birds
what
is
this
much more
record is
explicitly
about.
about it.
A lot of what this record is about, I think, is filtered through analogy and metaphor. And so it takes a little bit of unpacking, and it takes a little bit of perspective that you have to kind of view these songs through a particular lens that it doesn't necessarily offer a clear answer to you. But Brandon's writing is stunning. As always,
they
severed
do.
antlers wrapped around a fence, elk harvest, your headlamps for organs, you keep a deer shot dead in your truck bed, and lips knitted kissing like pigeons shitting on windshields. That's just one verse from Daytona 500. That's
A lot of it's really like grotesque. Like there's a lot of like the emo lyrical callback to just like making things a lot of body horror is found often on here. Just like the idea of guts and entrails are
and
frequently discussed on here.
there's a lot of references to hunting as well. And you have to imagine,
Mhm.
I don't know Brandon's backstory. I don't know what she went through growing up, but you have to imagine that she must have probably growing up in Florida, maybe experienced that aspect of the lifestyle, you know, of being in a place where hunting and being able to kind of demonstrate your strength over nature is really, really important to your identity. And so that filters through into the storytelling on this record a lot, particularly in a song like Nursing Home Riot, with lines like, you know, there's no room in the ground for us, swimming pools filled with 1,000 drowned bucks, a raccoon crushed in a garbage truck, and you blush as you skin the hunt. You know, and the TV's on, no one's home, we see it glow through windows, release your kill back to the wild. There's this domesticity, this fake plastic domesticity brushing up against this ugliness of trying to brutalize and control nature that comes through in the ideas explored on this record as well. And that's maybe what the whaler represents most directly, right? Is there's very little more powerful or maybe more direct ideas of man attempting to control nature than the idea of a whaler, someone trying to slay the biggest beast on the planet. You know, that's, I think, such a powerful idea, such a powerful image for reflecting the ways in which man attempts to, or people attempt to control what is bigger than them. And you could read that through a lot of different lenses.
Absolutely. And I will say, as someone, I got very into I Became Birds. I think one of the things that sadly held it back from getting some more attention than I think it deserved is just the usual thing I see when any queer artist in a very often maligned but still respected subgenre gets popular, which is there's a lot of shit flinging about it. I've seen Brandon McDonald's lyricism referred to as Wendy's tweets for teenage emo kids. I've seen people talk about how they're a band that's obsessing over victimhood and things like that. And it's the same shit I saw a lot when black dresses started getting a lot of respect for sure.
It's not worth indulging. I think that's just the kind of
No,
anything
but
that you get
at
thrown
the
at
same
them.
time, those things that those people complain about were part of the hook of what got me into the band with Home is Where is. I found out they posted a joke meme about their own album about like that thing of like I actually want this instead, like the idea of that meme format that's like give me your hardest battle or something like that, where it's like instead it said something like give me an album that's a metaphor for realizing you're trans, but it through the idea of two separated from birth conjoined twins in Scientology who become births.
Yeah.
And of course the comment of what the fuck. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Well,
I
like,
remember.
you have a pretty powerful image with the album cover here as well, right?
Yeah.
That collision
Oh yeah.
of the collision of the natural with the kind of constructed human society that functions as an analogy for the collision of, you know, an attempting to freely express yourself in a situation where that's treated with hostility, right? The dying whale on the power lines, you know, essentially just so close to freedom, but also so ensnared and so far from it. It's a very affecting image. You know, like I said, it's a record that's about being jaded in a lot of ways. It's a record about kind of realizing or moving towards a certain ambition that you have and then recognizing how broken down you've been by that process. I mean, one of the lead single for this album was Yes, Yes, 1,000 Times Yes, which has this fantastic sort of folk strut to it, but is a song about being in a loveless relationship and, you know, professing your love for one another and then driving home in separate cars. It's this song about getting everything you wanted or achieving what you thought you wanted and then still being hollowed out and unable to really enjoy or take advantage of that. You know, you've achieved a certain level of success, you know, making this incredibly powerful and emotionally evocative trans art, and you're still in this situation where nothing's really changed, and where there's all that's left is this pressure to kind of improve on that. That's this pressure to make the next big statement. And so I really resonate with the way that Home Is Where have responded to that by sort of retreating and sort of like making a record that's just really pissed off about that whole situation and really just hollowed out by it all. And in its evocation of the jadedness of the American hometown as well, it reminds me a lot of one of my other favorite albums of the year, which is Wednesday's Rat Saw God, which captures, I think, a lot of similar.
Yeah, I thought about that a lot too.
Has as well. And then you have the 9/11 narrative,
Yeah,
the reference to 9/11 as well, the sense with which, and I think that ties in with some of the themes of American identity and the way that that kind of gets drilled into you and becomes a huge part of the white whale that you're trying to slay, essentially, as you actualize yourself growing up, as you have to kind of confront how much American identity is kind of seeped into you and affected the way that you view the world. And so that's, I think, what Everyday Feels 9/11's about. And I read into that, but because so much of the lyricism is elliptical and more evocative than direct, but I like that about it.
I mean, there's also the fact that I believe, I could be reaching here, but I believe that could also be a reference to during the pandemic, you would hear the phrase of every day is a new 9/11 because that's how much people in the world were dying every single day.
Yeah.
And then follow that up with 9/12, which is the idea of, and you just go back to work.
Yeah.
And we just pretend it didn't happen and we move on. And that fits so well in both those ideas with the concept of just feeling like you're forced to live a certain way in order to keep living, to keep surviving in this capitalist money pit.
You're your own tapeworm. Every night, light moonlights as moonlight, which is a great lyric. You know,
you sort of cut yourself up a little bit more every single day to feed the blood god, and they expect you to be like, oh, everyone else is doing it. Why aren't you doing it? And there's a sort of cynicality of like, is this what life is supposed to be? Is this all it's supposed to be? Is just, am I just the whaler? Am I just my occupation?
Am I just wailing in both senses of the word?
It's about constant desensitization in that you have to numb yourself constantly, not only to keep yourself from, like, you know, just the inevitable tragedies that just keep happening over and over and over again that you have to force yourself to live with. But again, it's that idea of, you know, getting and achieving that ideal American, like, family and what have you, and being in a loveless relationship. You have to desensitize yourself into, like, just being able to be like, no, this is what I'm supposed to want. This is what I'm supposed to be. I'm supposed to fit into this archetype. I'm supposed to fit into this, you know, preordained idea of what a person is supposed to be. And if you exist even slightly outside of that, you're going to experience this just, you know, immense sort of, I mean, dysphoria, call it what it is. And that's going to cause a rift inside of you that's never going to be reconciled. And that's what this is all about to me.
And there's a part of that also in I Became Birds where, you know, it uses the theme of religion as an idea of how we enforce these archetypes, and the idea of, like, as a trans person, they will do whatever you can to separate you from the person that you are as much as possible. And this album does that in a separate way with the themes of structure surrounding family, not only just surrounding family, but surrounding work, surrounding how you live your life, surrounding everything like that. Daytona 500 is one of my favorite songs on the album for that reason. It's I'd argue it's maybe the most country song on the album, most alt country sounding song on the album, and it has the most upfront cynicism while also having that almost jaunty ballad-esque style to the acoustic backing track that makes it so much fun as it builds up.
I want to wrap up the discussion of this just by talking about the fact that where the album chooses to end. So I mentioned earlier that it has this weird structure where the continuous musical narrative starts with Every Day Feels Like 9/11 and ends with Wailing for Sport. But they've chosen to break the album up in a slightly different way, such that it ends with the song Floral Organs, which is one of my favorite songs they've ever put out, partially because, well, first of all, it is a direct musical callback to my actual favorite Home Is We're song, which is Long Distance Conjoined Twins, in the sense that this song has almost the same chords and the same vocal style. So as soon as I first heard this, when I was listening to the album for the first time and it hit, I started crying because I've listened to Long Distance Conjoined Twins so many times, and hearing them directly call back to it musically at the very end of this album, I wasn't prepared for that, and it completely shattered me. And also, the other thing about it is that it's a love song. Like, it's one of the most plaintively hopeful songs that the band have ever written. And Brandon has said as much in interviews that she's done. You know, she's talked about how the song is very unique for them. And it's funny because it's a song that evokes, you know, rotted whales' guts and buzzards feasting on the, you know, the innards and all that sort of stuff. But it ends in this beautifully hopeful place, climbing trees older than anyone alive. We braid our intestines together, spitting teeth into each other's mouths back and forth until we make a smile. You know, it takes that grotesquerie. And, you know, obviously it's not a new thing, and it's still a quite, you know, emotionally powerful thing to talk about trans themes while evoking, you know, human entrails and insides and the kind of disgustingness of the human body that you're forced to confront in a very particular light when you're trans.
Very Cronenbergian.
Yeah, and so taking that idea and taking that image and then this disgusting but beautiful and very romantic idea of braiding your intestines together with someone else and spitting teeth into each other's mouths, this melding and the shearing of this ugliness, this shearing of this melting pot of the human body into this pure oneness, this pure unity in this final moment is so, it's such a Home Is Weird place to end. And it really, combined with that musical callback and just how satisfying of an end to the arc of the album it is, it really cemented, like, I got it once I got to this point, and I have been in love with the album ever since. I think it's a great record. I think it absolutely lives up to the hype that I Became Birds put forward, and it's an absolutely essential 2023 listen. All right, let's do our favorite tracks and ratings for The Wailer really quickly. Jake, why don't you leave us off?
Favorite song on here, and I think one of the most anthemic and throttling songs of the year, is Skin Meadow. Probably Every Day Feels Like 9/11, fantastic. And I'm going to shout out Floral Organs. I think that's a fantastic closer. I don't have a least favorite track, honestly. There's nothing really here that kind of sinks below the line to me. And strong 8 out of 10 from yours truly.
All right. My three favorite songs are Skin Meadow, Lily Pad Pupils, and Floral Organs. I also don't have a least favorite track. I think it flows beautifully, and it's such a singular piece that it's really hard to break it up. And I'm also going to give it an 8 out of 10.
I loved it a lot. I think my favorite tracks are Daytona 500, Every Day Feels Like 9/11, and Yes, Yes, 1,000 Times Yes. I'm giving it a strong 8. It's an album that I've enjoyed the more I listen to it, so that's already a great sign. I can't wait to see Home Is Where make more stuff.
Yeah, it's been a great year for emo already, but this is still our most distinctive releases. So yeah, really celebrate it. All right,
this month has been the perfect example of, I remember in May people being like, oh, this year's been kind of weak in terms of albums, and then this month happens. So
well, that gives us an average overall of 8.0 for Home Is Weird's The Wailer. All right, let's get into our second album discussion of today. We've got half an hour left, so we'll keep it nice and tight and concise, which is not what the record is.
Yeah,
because we're talking
about
what
Swans ever does.
We're talking about Swans, we're talking about their new album, The Beggar. I feel like this is maybe the 5th time that Swans have put out a last album maybe not, I don't know if it's explicitly been called their last album again, but it has that vibe to it.
I've heard rumors of it.
Certainly,
Yeah.
I think with each release that Michael Gira puts out now, he seems to accompany it with press that reflects a sense of extreme exhaustion that I can understand.
To the point where he names a song "Michael is Done."
Yeah, I can understand where he's coming from with this one. So this is the first Swans album since 2019's Leaving Meaning. It's yet another album that was financed through the release of a demo record that, much like the last 5 or 6 Swans albums, has been used to self-finance the recording, and it's yet another immaculate sounding and incredibly dense and hypnotic Swans landscape. Emily, why don't you lead us off with what your thoughts are on the Beggar and how it compares to Swans' recent material?
So I'm a pretty big Swans fan. They're one of my favorite bands, and I always leaned a lot more into their post-rock, post-punk side. I'm not as big into their pre-Children of God material as some people are. When I first heard of Swans, I didn't even know what post-rock was. I thought people were making up a fake genre to describe this band. Once I got in from White Light, from the Mouth of Infinity, I fell in love, and Soundtracks for the Blind is still one of my favorite albums ever. When I finally listened to The Beggar, I knew that a lot of the songs on this album were songs that they began working on in the last one, and I worried we were just going to get a bunch of outtakes. And no, this is a very different album from that one in terms of sound. At certain points in the album, it feels almost more accessible than any album they have done in a while. I believe I joked with Jake about it on the night it came out that I was like, he's actually singing words, not just see it. I see it all. You can, it's not the same word over and over again. People could interpret these lyrics. I really enjoyed it. I don't think it's their best. There are a lot of issues I will have with it. If some of it come down to the certain thing that makes this 2 hours long, but at the end of the day, like, I think this is the most impressive Swans release since To Be Kind, maybe. If not since The Glowing Man, and it's a close one with The Glowing Man.
So I think the three of us are going to come from slightly different places with this record, just because I know what each of us thinks of it. And I think, Jake, as happens, I think more than rarely, you're kind of going to be a little bit in the middle. So I'm going to go next, and then Jake can kind of tie our disparate perspectives together. I was thoroughly underwhelmed by this for a few specific reasons, but there's also aspects of it that I want to compliment, even though I think that this is probably one of my least favorite Swans releases. First of all, I will compliment that I think Michael Gira's lyricism is more interesting in some respects. There's a mixture of, like, this record I think has some of the most well-written and well-conceived and visually impactful lyricism that Michael's written in a long time. It also has some of the cloying refrains and repetitive hypnotic beat into the ground ideas that have distanced me a little bit the more Swans use them over and over again. But I can look past that when the lyricism is as interesting as it is across this record. I mean, I think there's some genuinely powerful poetry that Michael explores, nothing that's terribly thematically new, but there is this, I think, more of a movement towards focusing on this sense of isolation and jadedness that honestly makes it a fitting companion for the Home As We're record in some respects, actually. But the sense with which, yeah, as the song says, Michael is done. There's this exhaustion, there's this weight of artistic expression and of living that makes the record feel, even by Swan's standards, particularly dour. It's a really defeated sounding album. It's an album that has a sense of weight to it on a personal introspective level that I think you got a good amount of on Leaving Meaning as well, but this feels really like depressive even by that standard. I think that the high watermark of Swans is The Seer and The Glowing Man. I think those two records are pretty well tied for their best works in my opinion. I think that The Glowing Man is honestly such a fantastic career summary and brilliant final statement that it felt like I was destined to be underwhelmed by Leaving Meaning. And the thing that really got me about that record was that there's some great ideas on it. I think it's a particularly backloaded album that has a really great final stretch of songs, but it also felt like, to a certain degree, the album was padding itself so that it felt like it could deliver on expectations. Like, to me, that record had about 50 minutes of great material that was stretched to twice that length, and I couldn't shake the feeling that it was doing that because the band or Michael didn't really know how to release a short record after the setup that they'd given with their previous albums. I'm reading into it there. I'm probably completely off base, but it just felt like the record was overextended in a way that it didn't need to be. And the Beggar suffers even more from that issue, in my opinion. There is, and I was already kind of weary of this from the singles that were released, Paradise Is Mine and Los Angeles City of Death, neither of which really do much for me, if I'm honest. In fact, I find Los Angeles City of Death to be outright irritating in its singular monotonous tone. But look, it's nothing that's new for Swans. I was trying to reconcile this all week. There's nothing the album is really doing that's all that worse on the page than things that I like about previous Swans records. But there is this sense of defeated hollowness to the way that this record carries itself that make it feel really challenging for me in a way that hasn't yet been rewarding. Maybe it will be. I'm not willing to write it off completely because I do have a lot of love for Swans. But a lot of it just feels incredibly perfunctory, particularly in songs like Paradise Is Mine and some of the longer cuts on this record that really just sort of go through the motions. I do think that there are moments that stand out as particularly musically evocative in a really straightforward way that Swans are known for being. Songs like Michael Is Done and Ebbing have this kind of like almost euphoric intensity to them, this sort of like, orgiastic religious feeling that they invoke that's very Swans. But it's kind of like a shtick that I sort of get and doesn't really give me I don't feel the same sense of power and compelling just sort of beauty and sensation in it that I have in previous Swans records. Maybe it's just that I get the trick by this point. But then there are also songs like the final track on the record, which I find irritating. I do like the opening track. I think the opening track's quite evocative and sets a mood in a really, really effective way. And also, the whole album is immaculately produced, as all Swans records are. There's a real sense of space that's well dictated and well established. And I can't really fault it in any of those senses. But really, I think where my limitations with this record reach fever pitch is the 43-minute collage, The Beggar Lover, which is not the first collage that Swans have released. As the parenthetical implies, it's actually the third, but it's the first collage of this nature to actually make it onto a studio album. And what I mean by collage is that it is basically a series of musical ideas that are vaguely stitched together. And what's particularly trying about this is that about 40-50% of the musical ideas on this are recycled from previous Swans songs, which is not inherently a problem, because I understand that there's a lot of introspection and reflection on Michael's artistic process and sort of looking backwards to mine a direction forward and maybe not seeing one through the thematic ideas of the album. But hearing these Swans type beat ideas from The Glowing Man, from To Be Kind, from Leaving Meaning, there's a few bits of Leaving Meaning that are kind of restitched in here and just sort of assembled into this thing that just sort of lumbers and moves through aimlessly. I found it to be patience trying the first time I heard it and insufferable the second time I heard it, if I'm being honest. Yeah, as I said, I think there's moments of really compelling musicianship here. I think the actual title track is one of the best set up and established and most satisfying grooves of the album. But yeah, generally, I think I feel about as disenchanted and disengaged from Michael's particular aim with this record and execution as he seems to be with his artistic process and some of the ideas the record explores. So it's left me in a weird place. I fully admit that I'm in the minority on this. Seems to be rapturously received by Swans fans, and I'm very happy for that. But I have to say, that it's not quite delivered for me in the way that I hoped it would. And I am curious what, if anything, it means for the future of Swans.
I'm in a curious spot here because I am technically, as Riley kind of alluded to, in the middle, even though, if I'm being really honest, I'm really a lot closer to them, all things considered, because I technically speaking, Swans are one of my favorite bands, have been for a very long time. And for the record, I want everyone to know that my favorite Swans album is The Seer. I want you to keep that in the back of your head for when I say something later. So I was really anticipating this record, especially because I'm in a weird place with Leaving Meaning personally, where I do simultaneously think that record is kind of underwhelming and also kind of underrated, because it was received with a bit of a ho-hum, kind of like, oh, this isn't as good as what came before it. And then I feel like people just kind of completely discarded it after that. And like,
Same.
I agree, it is very backloaded, but also it's got a lot of good stuff on there. I enjoy it. I probably think I my evaluation of it is I probably think the same of it that Riley does, but at the same time, I was a little bit more optimistic maybe for the future of Swans after that album than some people were. Even though they weren't doing, that trilogy of records level of stuff, I was still interested, I guess. This, on the other hand, I kind of feel like I agree with Riley in basically every respect, except for the key point of that I do like what is it called? Is it just called the Beggar 3?
Beggar Lover,
The Beggar Lover
3. And I would agree, I like most of it.
I also like the vast majority of it. And I feel like the problem I can sort of hone in on with this song is that I just kind of think this song is really good. And when you have a 40-minute long song stuck in the middle of your 2-hour long album, and I only think it's pretty good, that in and of itself is kind of a problem, because if you're going to invest a lot of your time in Swans and the structures and progressions that they have, you need an adequate payoff. That's basically what the trilogy is all about. It's about build up and payoff. And
it almost feels like it should be its own album.
Yeah, I mean, for all intents and purposes, I kind of treat it like it is.
I think there's a reason why the two previous 40-minute Swans collages have not been put on albums. They're interesting ideas and explorations of, here are the cool different things that Swans can do and how they can connect them. But they don't, it doesn't function here for me. It just
that's the thing, is that I enjoy the experience. I really don't think it should be on the album. I really, really feel like this would be a much better cohesive statement if you take this off and everything else coheres together. Because thematically speaking, like I'll combine two of the things that you said, in that Michael Gira is way more songful on this album. He's singing a little bit more traditionally than he has in more recent records. He's got a lot of writing on here that I find compelling, mainly because it's dealing, at least the way I read it anyway, lots of Swans lyricism is very kind of esoteric and difficult to read. But a lot of what I get from it is that this is a lot of Michael grappling with his own mortality, which is a much more grounded theme than Swans usually deal in. Like, from the start of their career to, basically the end of it, they are a band that deals very heavily in existentialism, spiritualism, religion, these lofty kind of like big, grand, transcendental ideas that match the music that they're making. Whereas here, I find it to be way more personable and engaging, and unlike Riley, I do find the sense of defeatism on here to be kind of compelling to a point. There are some moments on here where, again, me, big appreciator of The Seer, one of my favorite albums ever, where this album just kind of gets annoying in stretches, where there are moments where, like, yeah, I'm also really not that hot on Los Angeles City of Death. I know it's a very short song, but it still strikes me as being a little bit, it's so brief, it borders on being insubstantial, and developed enough to the point where I just don't really understand what it's supposed to accomplish.
I think there's a unification, and you've touched on it really, really well, Jake, this idea that Michael is terrified of his own mortality, and he's confronting that in a much more direct way than he ever has before. So many previous Swans records, he's kind of hidden his fears and his anxieties behind this sort of like, orgiastic and vague exploration of religious sort of enlightenment.
He was just a little boy.
And transcendentalism, right? And so much of that is stripped away here for this direct, bare questioning of what reason he has to exist, what meaning his life has, what purpose there is when all we are doing
what non-existence is.
And Los Angeles City of Death is a song that obviously explores how Michael's existential dread is only amplified by the hollowness of Los Angeles, the city where he's living, or the idea that he's exploring in that particular song. It's what it is. And like on a song like Unforming, which is like ironically one of the least compelling songs musically to me on the record, but one of the most compelling lyrically on the record, he's really exploring this idea of just dissolving and devolving, and this kind of sense of terror, but also this sort of gentle, is it going to be a freeing feeling of coming out of your body and legitimately just disintegrating into nothingness? And that's an interesting idea. And it carries through into the Beggar, and then into No More of This, and into Ebbing as well. Like he's progressively saying goodbye in more explicit terms as the album goes on. And there's something really kind of emotionally raw about how he explores that without covering it up all that much. It's just, all of this is really great to read, and I enjoy reading it. It's just that I don't feel compelled by the musical expressions of these themes, and I don't feel compelled by the way the album attempts to unify them. It just feels sloppy, especially when you get to the Memorias, which is this kind of ear scraping, another plundering, plodding song with these weirdly annoying baby crying sounds that are kind of recurring.
Yeah, I'm not into that.
And yet, if I sit down and read the lyrics, I see the turquoise lake spread out flat between the desert hills. I feel the sun penetrate my skin. He goes on talking about climbing and clawing and feeling his throat fill with liquid and exhaling hollow thoughts like sparrows into the sky as he crawls deep into the guts of the earth. Amazing writing that's so evocative and so powerful that I feel so distanced from when I'm trying to take in the music of it. It's just one of those things where I would love to read, at this point, I would actually love to read a book of poetry or just any kind of writing that Michael could do. I think he could really kind of reinvent himself artistically by not feeling as though he has to channel all of his creativity into this music, because it just doesn't seem to be where the inspiration is, at least from how I'm taking it in. I feel like maybe the future for Michael artistically might be pivoting away from it and maybe exploring different formats for expressing himself, because I just think that trying to tie these very compelling and quite emotionally powerful ideas that he has into this music is just not working for me anyway. And I understand I'm not representative of the consensus on this, but I do think that there's a lot that's compelling about what Michael wants to explore here, but I think the music is ill-equipped to meet.
I actually think that there's a bit of a dichotomy that this album has that makes that kind of gets to the center of why I personally think this is the weakest Swans album. That being that this album is caught in between the really compelling moments where Michael is talking about his own mortality and the elements of the themes that connect to that, and also the idea of being this kind of retrospective, backward-looking sort of like Swans career summary album. Because whenever it's doing the Swans career summary album thing, it's kind of all but lost me. Like every time it tries to revisit ideas that are like again, I like the sound collage thing, but I like it in isolation. I really don't understand. Like I get in theory tying your career and your work to the idea of like your life and like looking back on it like that. but the flow of the album just doesn't support that to me. Like, it doesn't really lead anywhere. It just kind of happens at the very end of that, the very beginning of the second disc. And it feels very incidental. So, like, I enjoy it, but in a very removed sense. If you combine everything together, I feel like you'll have a much more well-realized, more interesting, and, like, succinct whole. But even at the same time, there are a couple instrumental ideas on here that just really don't mess with me, right? Like, other than Los Angeles, City of Death, there are moments on here where, like, I can't remember what song it is specifically, but like there are these really intense kind of sour female vocal harmonies on one of the earlier tracks here, and they
Paradise
just
is
repeat. Paradise is Mine, and they are so fucking annoying. Like, I am so glad they do not last the entirety of that song, because like this isn't like The Seer where the repetition is like accomplishing a hypnotic effect. It's like, no, I just like flat hate listening to this. Then there, like, again, you mentioned The Memorious. I'm really not that into. I think it's a pretty underwhelming note to leave the album on. I kind of wish that it just ended with The Beggar Lover, even if they're going to include that, why not end on that sort of Titanic moment? I feel like that just sort of makes more sense. But then there's also stuff like, again, No More of This is also a song that I personally just don't get a whole lot out of. Or Why Can't I Have What I Want Anytime That I Want is also another song that just leaves me feeling rather cold.
Favorites.
But I do have some moments on here like The Parasite, which I think is the best song on here. This is the ideal late career Swans track for me. It's hypnotic in all the ways that I want it to be. It's heavy in all the ways I want it to be. I like Michael Is Done in that same kind of vein. The title track as well. Ebbing, I think, is one of the most beautiful Swans tracks basically ever made. And everything that I haven't mentioned, I think, is more or less good. It's just that this is the epitome of a mixed bag that they just, like, to me, Swans have basically, they're a band that make two different kinds of albums. They make straight up stone cold masterpieces and very interesting experiments. And when I go into a Swans album, it's finding out which one of those I'm going to get. And more often than not, with these late career Swans albums, they veer a little bit more towards the masterpiece direction. So it's a little bit sobering to not get that immediate gratification, especially when you have to sink so much of your time into it. And I get the appeal. It's just that this is certainly just not the Swans release for me. It's the one that I just connect with the absolute least.
Yeah, I agree. The Paradise is a standout simply because it's one of the things on the record that sounds the most novel, like of anything. Like, it sets up a kind of like, this is a really actually interesting,
very ethereal,
that doesn't really remind me of anything else immediately Swans wise. There's motifs and stuff, but then you go into Paradise Is Mine and it's okay, we're back to stuff I've heard before, which is not inherently bad, but just doesn't do it for me. And I agree about Ebbing being a standout as well. That feels like one of the biggest moments where a sense of, like, not euphoria, because that's not quite the right term, but just the sense of catharsis is reached in this process of reckoning with your vulnerability and your proximity to death, that feels the most compelling. In fact, I kind of wish that had been the closer. And again, I agree that The Memorious is underwhelming as a musical end, but I actually think it's the lyrical highlight of the album, as I mentioned. So it's just at cross purposes with so much of it. Emily, back to you.
I find myself disagreeing a lot, and granted, I think the thing that really sold me on the album was Michael Is Done. Just the way it slowly builds. But like, if I were to go back into the song and try to find where each moment like builds up in the song, where it goes up another level, it'd be hard to reach it because it's so filled with so many elements at once. Like, once it'll add like one voice, and when you're listening to it live, like while you're listening to it in the album, you're like, oh my god, what an explosion sound effect. And then you try to go back to record it and you're like, it all sounds like there's like it blends together while still building. And I think that's such a fascinating thing. And it takes up the majority of it, and then it drops out, and then we get more of the Michael Is Done. And it's such a unique element that it immediately sold me on it. I like most of The Beggar Lover. I think that there's a lot of interesting elements. I would agree that certain elements, like the sound collage, I don't think it needs to be cut outright, but it goes on for too long. And there's several points on it. Like, it is a song that I do not think has to be 40 minutes. It probably would be better, maybe closer to 25. And I think that would fit a little bit better. And it could be better as a closing track as well.
I
Or
think you could
separate
do
it out.
without the section where Michael is just like sleepy Michael, milky Michael for like 2 minutes straight. I could do with
I was gonna say the one part of the song that I remember being like, I'm not a big fan of this, is the one where it's just his daughter just repeatedly going, he played knick-knack on my thumb with a knick-knack powder rock, give a dog a bone. And I'm like,
Yeah. If you had
do we
told
need
me,
that for
if
6
you had told
minutes?
me that, you know, the newest Swans album has a section where his young daughter sings Knick Knack Paddywhack, I would have believed you immediately. Like that just sounds like such a like obvious like Swans, make a
But
Swans
for it
album.
happening is as part of a sound collage for 2 minutes for like 5 minutes of a 40-minute song is a little much. But at the same time, if you shrink it down, it almost reminds me of that part in Soundtracks for the Blind where you hear the little girl going sunny days, and you just hear that on repeat. And I think that one works very well in Soundtracks for the Blind. And I think if you put that into a long song like this, it could work incredibly well. And I think this could have worked incredibly well, but
Yeah.
it is bloated.
I like the section where Jennifer Jira talks about being, you know, it personifies the black cloud of death and all that sort of thing, and talks about how she's terrified of it. It's a nice sort of counterpoint to the sort of twisted, dark, life-affirming tone of her song on The Glowing Man, which I've always loved. So yeah, look, there's things about this that I think are admirable. I think the sound design is really, really good. I think there's some really interesting and bold musical moments that present a nice dynamic for Swans and offer something new. But yeah, overall, I think it's fair to say that we're not all quite on board with this one yet, but we'll see what happens as time goes on.
I think the done part is more the idea of death approaching. And I think that's what the beggar is meant to represent in a way. Like the idea of like, I am constantly begging death for more days, and I'm tired of having to keep doing that and having to keep fear this. And I think that's sort of what that could represent in the title. And
Michael Gira is Hayao Miyazaki. He's going to keep saying that whatever he's making is the last thing he's making until he actually drops dead. Because I think that, like, it's kind of like Riley mentioned, it's just like the idea of him pivoting to poetry is maybe an interesting prospect, but it's like, I feel like he only knows how to express himself through music at this point. He's been doing this for so long, and these statements are so grand, so big, that it's just like, there is no other way for him to do this. And that in itself is kind of what's compelling about Swans to this day, I think, is that it's just like, you just don't have another band operating at this magnitude, to the point where this is easily my least favorite Swans album. And I still am really, really glad that I sat through this 2 hour long album multiple times that I didn't really personally get a whole lot out of, just because the novelty of the experience is worth the price of admission. So like, even if I didn't personally get that kind of addictive, challenging feeling that I want out of a Swans album, it's a bizarrely accessible kind of listen, even though it's so fucking long. So like, you know, this is something that you're really just going to have to see for yourself.
I feel like even though we disagree on a lot of parts of the album, I feel like we all at least have one moment on here that we can all at least like say something about, like, this represents something about like what we love about Swans.
As I said, I find a lot of what Michael is going for thematically, and a lot of what he's talking about and the way he writes, to be really, really exciting for him. And Jake described it as more grounded, and I think that's the perfect way of describing it. It just adds a new dynamic that is refreshing, even if the music leaves me a little bit less than excited. All right, let's do our favorite tracks and ratings then for Swans, The Beggar. Emily, why don't you go first?
Okay, yes. My favorite tracks are, of course, Michael Is Done. Why Can't I Have What I Want Anytime That I Want? No More of This. I'm going to give it a strong 8, the same as Home Is Where. I think that it is right below Swans is like what I'd say are their quintessential 5. And I put it in the same camp as I would a lot of other albums that I love but aren't quite there. And
All righty. My 3 favorite tracks are Ebbing, The Parasite, and The Beggar, the title track. My least favorite is absolutely The Beggar Lover, and I'm going to give this one a 5 out of 10. Jake.
All right, 3 favorite tracks: The Parasite, favorite thing on here, then The Beggar, the title track, and Michael is Done. Least favorite track on here is definitely Los Angeles City of Death, and I give the album a 6 out of 10. Swans are that good of a band. Even their worst album is still pretty good.
All right, which gives us an average overall of 6.3 for Swans, the Beggar. All right, brings us to the end of the episode today. Thank you to Emily for joining us yet again. Go and check out Emily's channel as well. Link will be below.
Absolutely. I just released a new video essay, and I am currently working on 3 different videos. 2 shorts that I'm working on are Across the Spider-Verse and Beau is Afraid, which I feel like both of those 5 hard with the kind of audience that usually that fits with Jams and Tea. And the other video is I have my 10,000 subscriber celebration video where I am doing a reading of my entire Blu-ray collection video. I recorded it. It took 6 hours. And I'm going to, well, my friend is who I am hiring to edit this because I need to do other videos in the meantime. Is going to be cutting it down to hopefully somewhere below Snyder Cut length, but probably not.
Ideal. That's a good sort of benchmark to aim for. So yes, go and check out Emily's channel. Get the likes and the views and the subs up over there as well. We just recently celebrated 7,000 subscribers on Jams and Tea, so we're
well deserved.
We're riding that high as well. So it's been really, really awesome. Okay, well, if you enjoyed our discussion of these 2 albums today, please let us know what you thought of them in the comments below. Did you agree with us? Did you disagree? Do you have a different perspective or interpretation on either of the records that we talked about?
Did you think I was the one that was right about the Swans album? It's okay to say I was right.
Your feedback is encouraged.
Yeah, feedback is encouraged, especially if it flatters my feelings.
Absolutely, yes. I mean, we can all take a little bit more ego stroking, I think, in general. So
I'm kidding,
yes,
but I'm not.
If you want to go above and beyond and support us directly for just $1 a month, you can hit the join button on our YouTube page, become a member of the Jams and Tea family, get yourself entitled to perks such as your name and the title crawl of every video on the channel. Plus, if you want to recommend us something to talk about in one of our now episodes, your recommendation will go to the top of the pile. Until next time, though, folks, rock over London. Rock on Chicago, Energizer. It just keeps going and going and going.